I have a question about the recent DSA fine imposed on X. I have actually some questions about, we've seen on X itself by the CEO of XAI, Elon Musk, some claims about how the fine was calculated. I think I already asked this question on Friday, but I do assume that maybe some details are clearer now. Elon Musk said that he was fined as a person, and I would like to actually understand how the fine was calculated, who was the ultimate surface attack area for this fine, and also whether we have established who is the provider of X services. So essentially the question is, how was the fine calculated, what's the surface, and who's the provider according to the TSA? Is Musk right in saying he was personally fined?
Jan, to allow us to reiterate and clarify the reply to this question. Thomas.
Thank you, Paula. Thank you, Jan. I can recall what I said on Friday. These claims are simply wrong, to start with. So, how did we do? You have a corporate structure that you have to identify every single time. This is the case for competition cases, it's the case for the DSA, it's the case for the DMA. Before coming to an end decision, you have to identify the corporate structure of a company. I can give you a bit more details on this. You have in charge of X, of course, the Irish subsidiary, XIUC. We have identified also as part of this X Holdings Corp, XAI, as you rightly mentioned, and Mr. Elon Musk. That's for the corporate structure. The calculation of the fine has nothing to do with the corporate structure. We look at the breach, we look at the nature of the breach, the duration of the breach, the recurrence of the breach, the gravity of the breach. These are the 4 criteria. Based on this, we come to an amount, and the last step that we're doing is making sure that this amount doesn't exceed the 6% ceiling foreseen in the legislation for the provider. So if you ask me again to whom that decision was addressed, that decision was addressed to the entire corporate structure that I just gave you, but it has nothing to do with Mr. Elon Musk himself. We don't fine individuals. This doesn't make sense, and this is not what the Commission is doing.
And it's worth repeating, we don't fine individuals. Jan, you have a follow-up.
Yeah, I have a couple of follow-ups actually, which will be parceled up together. The first is whether there's been any official communication from the US administration to the Commission about this fine. We have seen, of course, a lot of tweets from Musk himself, but also from figures of the senior figures of the US government. So I would like to understand whether any back channel communication or any official communication has been relayed to the Commission about this specific fine and what these communications were about. And second, I'd like to understand how the Commission can ensure that Mr. Elon Musk, or the Musk group, so to speak, the corporate structure, pay such fine, because the intention doesn't seem to be that. So what tools does the Commission have in its arsenal of legal remedies to claw back these 120 million euros?
Thank you, John. So, on the contacts, I mean, of course, official contacts took place because prior to adopting such a big decision, and again, this is a usual practice, this has nothing to do with this specific case, we of course inform the companies ahead of such a major decision. So at services level, our services have been in touch with X's corporate structure, indeed, to inform them ahead of the decision that this would take place. Now, on the payment of the fine, I mean, X will have to pay that fine. The 120 million euro will have to be paid. We will make sure that we get this money. Now, there are again procedural steps to take into account, and any decision taken by the Commission can be challenged in front of the Court of Justice of the European Union. So that would be an appropriate way to potentially challenge our decision, because we follow due process, we have processes in place, and we will stick to them.
Thanks. Coming back to X, after everything that happened this weekend, including the CEO of X comparing the European Union to Hitler Germany, will you still continue, the European Commission, to communicate over Mr. Musk's network? Thank you.
First of all, let me say that it's part of the freedom of speech to put out even completely crazy statements. And I guess awarding companies of Mr. Musk, as explained by Thomas, a fine does not seem to warn the EU his sympathy. And otherwise, nothing to comment. Other questions? Yeah.
Yes. Then it's a follow-up to you, obviously remaining on X. What's the rationale behind it, except the arguments that you gave? Why is it useful to stay on it? And secondly, what's your red line? I mean, he compared the EU to Hitler Germany and called for its abolition. How further can you get?
It's part of the freedom of speech that we very much praise in the EU, and it allows even for the craziest statements that you can imagine. On your more concrete question, Thomas.
Yes, sorry. So on the Commission's corporate use of social media platforms, we're using 15 of them, and we constantly monitor developments. As of today, as we speak, of course, we're still using X as one of the 15 social media platforms we are active on. Why? Because this is a mean for us to still get in touch to citizens, stakeholders, to do some outreach work, to precisely speak about what we are doing in the EU. So, yes, I mean, other jurisdictions like Russia do not allow their citizens to access US big tech companies. We do. We don't tell anyone who has to use which platform. We're using them, but we want to use them in a responsible way. And this is what our legislation is requiring from all platforms.
Over the weekend, X also suspended the ad account of the Commission. And I was wondering, what is the follow-up of that? Of course, we've heard that the Commission hasn't used its ad account since 2023, if I'm not mistaken, but will there be any further message on that? Secondly, is there any evaluation or internal procedure to check whether X is a safe platform to be used at least on the institutional devices?
Thank you, Nupriya. Let me start with your first question on the X ad account, if I'm not mistaken. So let me start by saying that the Commission's corporate account has not been blocked. We use, all social media platforms in good faith. We're using the tools and the features that are being made available to the Commission. And we, of course, expect these tools to be fully in line with the platform's own terms and conditions and with our general digital legislative framework. Let me just recall maybe on this also that the Commission is not using paid advertising or any paid services for X. We have stopped doing this in 2023, so that remains, of course, fully valid. Now, on the institutional devices, one decision was taken last year. It was to suspend the use of TikTok on our corporate devices for security reasons. That's a decision that applies to TikTok. It's still in place and only to TikTok, so no development to announce here as it relates to X.
How would you describe the accusation from J.D. Vance that this fine against X is an attack on American people?
So, we have been very clear. I can be very clear once again. The DSA and the DMA and our legislation applies equally to all online platforms in the EU, to all of them. It applies to Asian platforms, it applies to American platforms, it of course applies to European platforms. So that's a very important thing to keep in mind. Now, on the crazy statements that you're referring to, it takes one or two sentences to polarize the world. It takes one or two sentences to create escalations or tensions. It takes hundreds and thousands of sentences, and we're doing it here from this podium, to diplomatically appease tensions, because we have many shared challenges with our American friends. You may call this weakness, I call this strength. This is European strength. And this is what we will keep doing also with our US counterparts.
And put it in also other different words, the fine reflects non-compliance with law. It is not about ideology.
With the Commission meetings in Washington this week, will there also be meetings with representatives from Silicon Valley, and how will the latest with X tie into these wider trade issues, considering the fact that Washington has repeatedly suggested that what happens with DSA, DMA is linked to the broader trade environment? Thank you.
So there is a team who will be in Washington to discuss the implementation of the agreement with US, and we will not go into whatever may come out of it. But it is important to remind it's about the implementation of the EU agreement with the US on trade.
Hi. So I have a few questions. One, have you actually heard from... Is there echo? Okay. Have you heard from X since the fine, and has there been any indication of what their next steps will be? To follow up on Jan's question, have you actually heard from US officials since Friday? Not in general. And I know that the meeting is on today, but I think I would like to hear a response to that. There's also been a lot of clapbacks asking for a lot of things, including the suspension of officials' accounts. Are you aware of this, and do you have any response? And finally, can we expect the rest of the cases to sort of domino and have more decisions in the near future? Thank you so much.
Elisa, on your first three questions, we already provided replies before. Thomas was clear about it. On the final question.
Yes, thank you, Paula. On the final question, yes, no. On the final question, thank you, Paula. So the rest of the cases, we have an independent, neutral, objective enforcement agenda. So once cases are ready, we adopt decisions. Now, of course, what EVP Virkunen has also said, getting the first case over the line is quite a major milestone because it requires going through all the processes for the first time. We have done this. Now, can it potentially speed up other cases because now we're familiar with the procedural steps? Why not? But we will only go ahead with cases once we have solid cases at our disposal and once we're sure that we can win them, of course.
Were you surprised by the political turn of events that received a fine related only to a rule violation? It became explosive with positions taken by practically all the officials of the American administration. And do you share the opinion expressed by President Antonio Costa, who was the only one to say that if we were allies, we did not criticize each other, and that this was not a way to proceed? And my second question, I would like to understand a little bit what you mean by the term disinformation. Is it when Elon Musk starts on his network as an individual saying that President Ursula von der Leyen is not elected, that the Commission is not elected, and he circulates it with millions and millions and millions and retweets, and it goes viral and it becomes the line? How are you going to defend yourself by saying no, it's not true, or are you going to attack him? Because disinformation is one of the things that the DSA should defend against. Normally, it would warrant a fine. Here, I get the impression that you are ostriches. You've buried your head in the sand. You say, no, you can say anything on X, it's freedom of expression. No, in Europe, it's freedom of expression. Freedom of information is something that is regulated. We don't just say anything, even if it's fanciful, because what Musk says is not fanciful. It's violent. It's a direct attack on you. And you tell yourself, no, it's not serious. Excuse me, but I am a little perplexed. So as I said before, even this kind of statement is actually covered by freedom of expression. Now you have asked is it justified or not? Precisely, that's what I was saying.
It's about a fine that follows the violation of a law. And therefore, it is not about ideology. Now, there are those who confuse the two things. But it must be remembered that it is about enforcing the legislation. And so, if we want to have a role in the economy and on the platforms, we must respect the legislation. It's as simple as that. That we are not entering into ideological discussions. And, as you can understand, I will not comment on the remarks of the President of the Council, Mr. Costa. It is up to him to make the comments he deems appropriate. So, with this, we conclude this topic and change the subject.